everyone. Back with Charlotte's Web. Tonight we're going to read chapters 5 and 6. And I don't know if you remember the end of chapter 4, he heard a little voice saying, "I'm right up here." And we were wondering who it was going to be. So let's find out. Chapter 5, Charlotte. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and he stared into the blackness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. Our barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there's usually something stirring. The first time he woke, he heard Templeton gnawing a hole in the grain bin. And Templeton's teeth scraped loudly against the wood and made quite a racket. "That crazy rat," thought Wilbur. "Why does he have to stay up all night grinding his clashers and destroying my people's property? Why can't he just go to sleep like any other decent animal?" The second time that Wilbur woke up, he heard the goose turning on her nest and clucking to herself. "What time is it?" Wilbur whispered to the goose. "Probably, obably, about 11:30, said the goose. "Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur?" "Too many things on my mind," said Wilbur. "Well," said the goose, "that's not my trouble. I have nothing at all on my mind, but I have too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on 8 eggs?" "No," replied Wilbur. "I suppose it is uncomfortable." "How long does it take for a goose egg to hatch?" Approximately 30 days all told," answered the goose. "But I cheat a little. On warm afternoons, I pull a little straw over the eggs and I go out for a walk." Wilbur yawned and went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard again the voice saying, "I'll be a friend to you. Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning." About half an hour before dawn, Wilbur woke and listened. The barn was still dark. The sheep lay motionless. Even the goose was quiet. Overhead, on the main floor, nothing stirred. The cows were resting. The horses dozed. Templeton had quit work and gone off somewhere on an errand. The only sound was a slight scraping noise from the rooftop, where the weather vane swung back and forth. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm and quiet, waiting for light. Day is almost here, he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared, and one by one the stars went out. Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with her head tucked under a wing. Then he could see the sheep and the lambs, and the sky lightened. "Oh, beautiful day, it is here at last. Today I will find my friend." Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen thoroughly. He examined the window ledge. He stared up at the ceiling, but he saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he would have to speak up. He hated to break the lovely stillness of dawn by using his voice, but he couldn't think of any other way to locate this mysterious new friend. So Wilbur cleared his throat. "Attention, please," he said in a loud, firm voice. "Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make himself or herself known by giving an appropriate sign or signal?" Wilbur paused and he listened, and all the other animals lifted their heads and they just stared at him. And Wilbur blushed, but he was determined to get in touch with his unknown friend. "Attention, please," he said. "I will repeat the message. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly speak up? Please tell me where you are, if you are my friend." The sheep looked at each other in disgust. "Stop your nonsense, Wilbur," said the oldest sheep. "If you have a new friend here, you're probably disturbing his rest. And the quickest way to spoil a friendship is to wake somebody up in the morning before he's ready. How can you be sure your friend is an early riser?" "I beg everyone's pardon," said Wilbur. "I didn't mean to be objectionable." He lay down meekly in the manure, facing the door. He didn't know it, but his friend was already very near. And the old sheep was right. The friend was fast asleep. Soon Lurvy appeared with the slops for breakfast. Wilbur rushed out and he ate everything in a hurry and he licked the trough. The sheep moved down off the lane. The gander waddled along behind them, pulling grass. And then, just as Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard a thin voice that addressed him the night before. "Salutations," said the voice. Wilbur jumped to his feet. "What?" he cried. "Salutations," repeated the voice. "What are they, and where are you?" screamed Wilbur. "Please, please tell me where you are, and what are salutations?" "Salutations are greetings," said the voice. "When I say salutations, it's my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised I used it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Here I am. Look, I'm waving." At last Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a kindly way. Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a great big spider web, and hanging from the top of the web with her head down was a large gray spider. She was about the size of a gumdrop. She had 8 legs, and she was waving one of them at Wilbur in a friendly greeting. "Can you see me now?" she asked. I hope you can see the picture, and you can see the spider web up there in the corner of the barn. And there's Wilbur. Look it up, okay? "Oh, yes, indeed," said Wilbur. "Yes, indeed. How are you? Good morning. Salutations. Very pleased to meet you. What is your name, please? May I have your name?" "My name," said the spider, "is Charlotte." "Charlotte what?" asked Wilbur. "Charlotte A. Cavatica, but you can just call me Charlotte." "I think you're beautiful," said Wilbur. "Well, I am pretty," said Charlotte. "There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see you can see me." "Why can't you?" asked the pig. "I'm right here." "Yes, but I'm nearsighted," said Charlotte. "I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways, but not so good in others. Watch me wrap up this fly." A fly that was crawling along Wilbur's trough had flown up and blundered into the lower part of Charlotte's web and was tangled in sticky threads. The fly was beating its wings furiously, trying to break loose and free himself. "First," said Charlotte, "I dive at him," and she plunged head first toward the fly. And as she dropped, a tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end. "Next, I wrap him up," she said. She grabbed the fly, threw a few jets of silk around it, and rolled it over and over, wrapping it so it couldn't move. Wilbur watched in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he detested flies, he was sorry for this one. "There," said Charlotte. "Now I knock him out so he'll be more comfortable," and she bit the fly. "He can't feel a thing now," she said. "He's going to make the perfect breakfast for me." And there's a picture of her doing her work. "You mean you eat flies?" said Wilbur. "Certainly. Flies, bugs, grasshoppers, beetles, moths, butterflies, cockroaches, gnats, midges, daddy-long-legs, centipedes, mosquitoes, crickets, anything that is careless enough to get caught in my web. I have to live with it, don't I?" "Why, yes, of course," said Wilbur. "Do they taste good?" "Delicious, of course. I don't really eat them. I know it sounds gross, drink their blood." "I love blood," said Charlotte. "Don't say that," said Wilbur. "Please don't say things like that." "Why not? It's true. And I have to say what's true. I'm not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but it's the way I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living somehow or other, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web and trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me. Her mother was a trapper before her. All our family have been trappers, way back for thousands and thousands of years. We spiders have been laying for flies and bugs." "It's a miserable inheritance," said Wilbur. Yes, it is," said Charlotte, "but I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think up this fancy idea of spinning a web, but she did. And it was very clever of her, too. And since then, all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's not a bad pitch on the whole." "It's cruel," said Wilbur, who did not intend to be argued out of his position. "Well, you can't talk," said Charlotte. "You have your meals brought to you in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get my own living. I have to live by my wits. I have to be sharp and clever, or I'm going to go hungry. I have to think things out. I have to catch what I can, take what comes. And it just so happens, my friend, that what comes is flies and insects and bugs. And furthermore, said Charlotte, shaking one of her legs, do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and multiply and get so numerous they'd destroy the earth and wipe out everything? Really, said Wilbur. I wouldn't want that to happen. Perhaps your web is a good thing after all. The goose had been listening to this conversation and chuckling to herself. There are lots of things that Wilbur doesn't know about life, she thought. He's really a very innocent little pig. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. He has no idea that Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy are plotting to kill him. And the goose raised herself a bit and poked her eggs a little further under her so they would receive the full heat from her body. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it, and Wilbur lay down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and the excitement of meeting someone for the first time. A breeze brought him the smell of clover, the sweet-smelling world beyond his fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend all right. But what a gamble friendship is. Charlotte's fierce. She's brutal. She's scheming. She's bloodthirsty. She's everything that I don't like. How can I learn to be like her, even though she is pretty? Of course, clever. Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time, he was to discover that he was mistaken about Charlotte because underneath her very bold and cruel exterior, she had a really kind heart, and she was to prove loyal and true to the very end. Chapter 6. It's called Summer Days. The early summer days on a farm are the happiest and fairest days of the year. Lilacs bloom and make the air sweet and then fade. Apple blossoms come with the lilacs, and the bees visit among the apple trees. The days grow warm and soft. School ends. Children have time to play and go fishing. Avery often brought a trout home in his pocket, warm and stiff and ready to be fried for supper. Now that school was over, Fern visited the barn almost every day to sit quietly on her stool, and the animals treated her as an equal. The sheep lay at her feet. At around the 1st of July, the workhorses were hitched to the mowing machine, and Mr. Zuckerman climbed into the seat and drove into the field. All morning you could hear the rattle of the machine as it went round and round, while the tall grass fell down behind the cutter bar. The next day, if there was no thunder showers, all hands would rake and pitch and load, and the hay would be hauled to the barn with Fern and Avery riding at the top of the hay wagon. Then the hay would be hoisted, sweet and warm, into the hayloft until the whole barn smelled like a wonderful bed of timothy and clover. It was a fine thing to jump in, too. It was perfect to hide in, and sometimes Avery would find a little grass snake in the hay and add it to the other things that he put into his pocket. Early summer days are a jubilee time for birds in the fields, around the house, in the barn, in the woods, in the swamp. Everywhere you could hear love and songs and nests and eggs. From the edge of the woods, the white-throated sparrow calls, oh, peepity, peepity, peepity. In an apple bower, the phoebe teeters and wags its tail, going, phoebe, phoebe. And the song sparrow, who knows how brief and lovely life is, sweet, 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 interlude, sweet, 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 interlude. If you enter the barn, the swallows swoop down from their nests and they go cheeky, cheeky. In the early summer, there are plenty of things for a child to eat and drink and chew on. Dandelion stems are full of milk. Clover heads are loaded with nectar. And the fridge is always full of ice-cold drinks. Everywhere you look, there's life. Even the little ball of spit on the weed stalk, if you poke it apart, has a little green worm inside. And on the underside of the leaf of a potato vine are bright orange eggs of the potato bug. It was on a day in early summer that the goose eggs finally hatched. This was an important event in the barn cellar. Fern was there, sitting on her stool when it happened. Except for the goose herself, Charlotte was the first to know that the goslings had at last arrived. The goose knew a day in advance that they were coming because she could hear their weak voices from inside the egg. She knew they were in a desperately cramped position inside that shell, and they were anxious to break through and get out. So she sat still and she talked less than usual. When the first gosling poked its gray-green head out and looked around, Charlotte spied it and made the announcement. "I am sure," she said, "that every one of us here will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of our friend the goose, she now has something to show for it. The goslings have arrived. May I offer my sincere congratulations." "Thank you, thank you, thank you," said the goose. "Thank you," said the gander. "Congratulations," said Wilbur. "How many goslings are there? I only see one." "There are 7," said the goose. "Fine," said Charlotte. "7's a lucky number." "Luck has nothing to do with it," said the goose. "It was good management and hard work." At this point, Templeton showed his nose from under his hiding place. He glanced at Fern and crept toward the goose, keeping close to the wall, and everyone watched him. Nobody liked him. He wasn't very well trusted. "Look," he said. "You say you have 7 goslings. There were 8 eggs. What happened to the other egg? Why didn't it hatch?" "It's a dud, I guess," said the goose. "What are you going to do with it?" said Templeton. "You could have it," said the goose. "Roll it away and add it to that nasty collection of yours." "Certainly, certainly, certainly," said the gander. "You may have the egg. But I'll tell you one thing, Templeton. If I ever catch you poking your ugly nose around our goslings, I'll give you the worst pounding a rat ever took." And the gander opened his strong wings and he beat the air to show his power. He was strong and brave, and the truth is, both the goose and gander were worried about Templeton, and with good reason. That rat had no morals. He had no conscience. He had no scruples, no consideration, no decency. He didn't even have any kindness, no higher feeling, no friendliness, no anything. He would kill a gosling if he could get away with it. The goose knew that. Everybody knew that. So there, I hope you can see it as a picture of Templeton coming over to take the goose egg. With her broad bill, the goose pushed the unhatched egg out of the nest. The entire company watched in disgust while the rat rolled it away. Even Wilbur, who could eat almost anything. "Imagine wanting a junky old rotten egg," he said. "Rats are rats," said Charlotte, and she laughed. "But my friends, if that ancient egg ever breaks, the barn is going to stink. Nobody's going to be able to live here because of the smell. A rotten egg is a regular stink bomb." "I won't break it," said Templeton. "I know what I'm doing. I handle stuff like this all the time." He disappeared into his tunnel, pushing the goose egg in front of him. He pushed and he nudged till he succeeded in rolling it into his lyre under the trough. That afternoon, when the wind had died down and the barnyard was quiet and warm, the gray goose let her 7 goslings off the nest and out into the world. Mr. Zuckerman spied them when he came with Wilbur's supper. "Well, hello there," he said. "Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 baby geese. Now, isn't that lovely?" So that's where we're going to end for tonight, and we will pick up with chapter 7 the next time we're together. Have a good night.